With victories in Iowa and New Hampshire, Donald Trump has essentially secured the Republican nomination, setting up a rematch of 2020. While GOP presidential candidates are falling in line behind Trump, Joe Biden's approval rating is 14 points worse than Trump's was heading into a re-election year. What does that mean for the general election? Let's head to the map. Despite his poor approval rating, there are several states Biden will definitely win: Washington, Oregon, California, where polls show Biden up by 20, Hawaii, Illinois, New York, despite a recent poll showing Biden up by just 9, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, D.C., Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Vermont. And will also give Biden Maine's first congressional district. Meanwhile, the following states are safe for Trump: Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, despite some polls showing incumbent Democratic Senator Jon Tester leading his re-election race. Both Dakotas, Nebraska At-Large, and the 1st and 3rd Congressional District. Kansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, and South Carolina. Now, before moving forward and getting into some state-specific polls, I just want to touch quickly on the national polls. Trump has led in 8 consecutive national polls with an average lead of 3.8%. If Trump wins the popular vote, he's going to win the Electoral College. But if Biden wins the popular vote, he won't necessarily win the general election. We've seen Republicans win the Electoral College without the popular vote in 2016 and 2000. With Trump leading nationally, state polls should show him ahead in the Electoral College. Let's take a look. We don't have any recent Alaska polls, but the GOP has won the state in 14 consecutive presidential elections. Our last poll is from October, which showed Trump up by 8 head-to-head versus Biden and in a 3-way race, including RFK Jr. Alaska is a likely Trump state. Iowa is another likely Trump state. He won it comfortably in 2016 and 2020, and also had a massive victory in the 2024 Iowa caucus. A John Zogby Strategies poll from earlier this month found Trump up by 12, and a December Emerson poll found Trump up by 9. Make no mistake, Trump wins Iowa again by a very comfortable margin. Trump also currently has a comfortable lead in Texas. He hasn't performed as well as previous Republican presidential candidates in Texas, and the state's demographics are shifting to become more favorable to the Democratic Party. However, it doesn't look like this is the year that Democrats flip Texas. Recent polling from Emerson shows Trump up by 8 head-to-head with Biden and by 10 in a 3-way race that includes RFK Jr. Texas is a likely Trump state. It still feels odd putting Ohio in the likely column, but the state has been shifting right for a while. Trump won it by 8 in 2016 and 2020, and November polling from Emerson found Trump up by 12 head-to-head with Biden and by 14 in a 3-way race with RFK Jr. As you may have noticed by now, RFK Jr. isn't drastically changing polling results, and I'm not convinced he's even going to make the ballot in most states. One thing to keep an eye on here in Ohio is Sherrod Brown. He's an incumbent Democrat running to keep his seat in the Senate. Brown is very popular in Ohio, and he may be able to keep the state relatively competitive for Biden. However, I don't expect it to be enough. Ohio is a likely Trump state. Florida is another state that has been shifting right. Governor Ron DeSantis has finally dropped out of the GOP primary, and he's endorsed Donald Trump. We've had a surprising lack of polling from Florida, but Trump has consistently led Biden. A recent Redfield and Wilton Strategies poll, not the best pollster out there, found Trump leading Biden by 11. Florida Atlantic University and Signal polls from November also showed Trump ahead by margins of 11 and 5 respectively. Hopefully we start to get some high-quality polls from Florida soon, but until then, it is a likely Trump state. I'm also putting Maine's 2nd Congressional District in the likely Trump column. A poll from a couple months back showed Trump up by 14, but he only won this district in 2016 and 2020 by 10 and 7 points respectively. It's a very white, very rural district which plays to Trump's strengths. With Trump at 219 electoral votes, let's move over to some of the states that Joe Biden will likely win. We haven't had a New Mexico poll since August, but it showed Biden leading Trump by 8. Democrats have won New Mexico in 7 of the past 8 presidential elections, with sizable margins of victory in the past 4. The closest margin was 2016, where Hillary Clinton still won by more than 8%. New Mexico is a likely Biden state. Colorado has been trending heavily towards the Democratic Party in recent elections, shifting from a purplish state in 2012 and 2016 to a nearly safe blue state today. A recent poll from YouGov shows Biden up by 7, and while Biden performed 6 points better against Ron DeSantis, it's still a likely margin of victory for him. Due to the fact that we just had a recent primary in the state, we have a lot of polling out of New Hampshire, and Biden's numbers look pretty decent. Marist has Biden up 7 head-to-head with Trump and up 3 in a three-way race with RFK Jr. Suffolk found Biden with a 7-point lead in a head-to-head matchup, and St. Anselm found Biden up 10 in a three-way race with RFK Jr. In either case, Biden is leading by 6 to 7 points on average, making this a likely state for him. That being said, the recent poll from Marist does make it seem that RFK Jr. could actually cost Biden New Hampshire, as his lead is within the margin of error. Keep an eye on that. And believe it or not, that's it for the likely Biden states. In the past, I've had Minnesota as a likely Biden state. Democrats have won Minnesota in every presidential election since 1976, but our last two polls only show Biden up by an average of 2.5%. Granted, these polls were conducted more than 2 months ago, but the margin looks very tight for Biden right now. While I still think Biden wins Minnesota, it's shaping up to be a bit closer than 2020 when Biden won Minnesota by 7%. Right now, it is in the lean Biden column. Virginia is another state that I've had in the likely Biden column in the past. However, recent polls show a tightening race. A January VCU poll showed Biden up by just 3, while a Mason-Dixon poll from December showed Biden up by 6. Biden won Virginia by more than 10% in 2020. He was able to expand on past Democratic margins of victory by running up the score in the suburbs. Perhaps his advantage won't be quite as strong in 2024. Virginia Democrats also recently won back the state's General Assembly, but they lost several swing districts in the process. While I expect Biden to win Virginia again, it might be a little close for comfort, and right now the polls have it as a lean Biden state. Another thing to keep in mind as we discuss these closer races is that the Democratic Party may have to funnel extra resources into states like Minnesota and Virginia if things start to look competitive. This chips away at the resources available for the true swing states, making them slightly tougher for Biden to win. For instance, the Democratic Party has had their eyes on North Carolina as a potential state to flip in 2024. North Carolina has been trending towards the GOP, with Trump winning it in 2016 and 2020. New voting laws may also benefit the Republican Party statewide. December polling from Redfield and Wilton Strategies, as well as Morning Consult, show Trump ahead by an average of 7.5% in a three-way race that includes RFK Jr. Morning Consult also polled a head-to-head matchup, and they found Trump ahead by 9. That actually puts North Carolina in the likely Trump column. And this is probably a good time to remind you that this map is based on the current polls. I'd expect this to be a slightly closer margin of victory come November. And it's also a good time to remind you to hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying this video. It helps out this channel a ton. Georgia is another state where recent polling has been very strong for Trump. Biden's narrow 2020 victory in Georgia was a little bit of a surprise, but it's looking less and less likely that he'll be able to hold on to the state in 2024. Republican Governor Brian Kemp is very popular, and new voting laws may favor conservative candidates statewide. But neither of those things will matter much in this race if Trump's poll numbers hold up. A recent UGA poll found Trump up by 8. A recent Redfield and Wilton Strategies poll found Trump up by 8 as well. A recent CNN poll found Trump up by 8 in a three-way race and up 5 head-to-head with Joe Biden. And a recent Morning Consult poll found Trump up by 7 in a three-way race and up by 6 head-to-head. In head-to-head matchups, Trump leads by an average of a little more than 6. In a three-way race, Trump leads by an average of a little more than 7. In either case, that makes Georgia a likely Trump state. This map is looking a much darker shade of red than my previous video. And Trump's poll numbers are looking strong in Arizona, another state he narrowly lost in 2020. Democrats have a lot going for them in Arizona: favorable shifts in demographics, high urbanization, and a potential ballot measure on making abortion a state constitutional right. These sorts of ballot measures have driven Democrats to the polls in big numbers in several states, including Ohio and Michigan. This measure hasn't officially made the ballot yet, and it could ultimately be the decisive factor in who wins Arizona in 2024. However, the current polls paint a pretty clear picture. Redfield and Wilton found Trump up by 6 in a three-way race, Bullfinch Group found Trump up by 10 head-to-head, and Morning Consult found Trump up by 4 head-to-head and by 3 in a three-way race. While these polls decisively show that Trump is the current favorite, I would like to note that they aren't the highest rated pollsters out there. But based on the current polls, Arizona is currently a lean Trump state in a three-way race and a likely Trump state in a head-to-head matchup. Since RFK Jr. still doesn't have ballot access in Arizona, I'm putting it in the likely Trump column. With Trump sitting at 262 electoral votes, any one of Michigan, Pennsylvania, or Wisconsin would win him the election. But before we get to the Rust Belt, we have a few other states to talk about. Let's start with Nevada. In 2022, Nevada elected a Republican governor, while incumbent Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto squeaked out a narrow victory over Republican Adam Laxalt. In my last video, I talked about how I believe the GOP really needs to embrace Nevada's vote-by-mail system if they want to win elections. Well, they're finally starting to listen, and they're encouraging their voters to vote early or vote by mail. This development makes the current poll numbers seem pretty realistic. An Emerson poll from earlier this month showed Trump up by 2 in a head-to-head matchup with Joe Biden and by 3 with third-party candidates in the race. Last month, a poll sponsored by a Democratic PAC found Trump up by 4. That's really bad news for the Democrats. And an early December poll from Morning Consult showed Trump ahead by 3 head-to-head and by 5 with third-party candidates included. In either scenario, Nevada is currently a lean Trump state based on current polls. Needing just 2 electoral votes to win the presidency, Trump could get there with an at-large victory in Maine. Maine At-Large has gone to the Democrat in 8 consecutive presidential elections. The margin hasn't typically been very close, but Trump was able to get within 3 points of Clinton in 2016. We have one remotely recent poll out of Maine, and it showed Biden leading Trump by 1%, which technically puts Maine At-Large in the tilt Biden column. Again, this map is based on current polls, and I think Biden will win Maine a bit more decisively than that. The 1st Congressional District has a stronger partisan lean than the 2nd Congressional District, and it's ever slightly more populated. I would be really shocked if Trump managed to win Maine, especially after losing the state by 9% in 2020. We're going to keep Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District in our back pocket for right now. Wouldn't it be fun if the fate of the presidency was determined by a single swing district? So we'll head down to Pennsylvania, where despite his poor approval ratings, Joe Biden's poll numbers are currently quite strong. We've had several high-quality polls since mid-December. Susquehanna showed Biden leading Trump by 8. Quinnipiac shows Biden up by 3 head-to-head and by 2 in a crowded field, and a Muhlenberg poll found Biden up by 1. We also have a couple results from the less reputable pollsters. Redfield and Wilton Strategies showed Trump up by 1 in a 3-way race that included RFK Jr., and the Bullfinch group found a tie. If we average out the head-to-head results, Biden leads Trump by a little less than 3%. If we average out the polls that include third-party candidates, Biden leads by an average of 1. Based on current polls, Pennsylvania is a tilt-to-lean state for Biden, and since I'm not very bullish on RFK Jr., I'm going to defer to the head-to-head polls and make it a lean Biden state. This is a significant flip from my previous video. In Wisconsin, we've had a lot of high-quality polls over the past few months. Morning Consult found Trump ahead by 4 head-to-head and by 6 in a crowded field, while JL Partners found Biden ahead by 4 head-to-head and by 5 in a crowded field. Emerson College found a tie when surveying likely voters, but a 1-point Trump lead among registered voters. Likely voter polls are generally considered to be more accurate, but either way, we're looking at a statistical tie. New York Times Siena, 538's highest-rated pollster, found Biden leading Trump by 2 head-to-head and with RFK Jr. in the race. And Marquette, the gold standard of Wisconsin polling, found Joe Biden up by 2. To make this rating, I'm going to average the head-to-head polls and use likely voter samples when both are available. When we do this, we get 5 polls that average out to a lead of Biden by just 0.8%, obviously putting Wisconsin in the tilt Biden column. Before we get to Michigan, let's touch on Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. This is Nebraska's most liberal district and home to the state's big metropolitan areas. Democrats carried this district in 2008 and 2020. Biden's 2020 performance was record-breaking by a Democrat. In 2022, the district was redrawn and may be slightly more favorable to the GOP. And in the absence of any polling, I'm going to make this district a tilt Biden district. Based on his 2020 performance and the fact that the Republican gubernatorial candidate Jim Pillen only carried the district by 0.1% in an otherwise strong showing statewide, I think you have to give Joe Biden at least a narrow edge in 2024. And that puts all eyes on Michigan. With a win, Joe Biden hits exactly 270 electoral votes, which I'm sure would be totally uncontroversial. Before diving into the polls, there are two potentially big things I'd like to point out. First, the Michigan GOP is broke, and they recently ousted the state party chair. I think it'll be challenging for them to fix the current dysfunction by the time the general election rolls around. Second, Michigan has a very large Muslim population, larger than Joe Biden's margin of victory in 2020. Some groups are concerned that his administration's response to conflict in Gaza could cost him the election. If that's the case, this is where it would happen. And based on current polls, it may already be happening. We have a lot of results from the past couple of months, so let's go through them. Target Insight, a group I have never heard of but who are rated by 538, shows Biden up by 4. Glenn Gariff Group shows Trump up 8 head-to-head and by 12 in a race that includes Liz Cheney as a third-party candidate for some reason. John Zogby Strategies shows Trump up by 3. Redfield and Wilton Strategies shows Trump up by 2 in a race with RFK Jr. Someone let me know in the comments section down below if there's a single Redfield poll that actually showed Biden ahead. It seems like they always have Trump up. That aside, an SSRS poll found Trump up by 10 head-to-head and by 8 in a three-way race with RFK Jr. As I'm sure many of you have already worked out, some of those large polling leads are going to put Trump in the lead on average. Using our head-to-head polling results and the Redfield poll, Trump leads by an average of 3.8%, putting Michigan in the lean Trump column, delivering him a victory in 2024. There are two big differences between this map and the one I published a couple months ago. First, both Michigan and Pennsylvania flipped, leading to Joe Biden actually gaining 4 electoral votes on Trump over the past 2 months. Second, several lean Trump states are now likely Trump states based on current polls. While Trump lost ground in electoral votes, I'd say this map is actually a bit stronger for him. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section down below, then check out my next video to see what the polls currently say about the state of the 2024 Senate races.